Okay, everybody, welcome back to the Dana Buckler Show. My name is Dana, and I am extremely pleased to welcome back for what I believe is now the fourth time filmmaker David Weiner. David, how are you?
Fourth time's the charm, right?
Abs-
This is the quadrilogy episode.
This is it. This is it. And now, interestingly enough, yes, because we are now talking about a fourth project that you have in the works. So just to recap, listeners who may not be familiar with the previous times you've been on the show, you are responsible. You are the director of the In Search of Darkness series. You are also the director of the recently released In Search of Tomorrow. I'm not going to do these films enough justice, so I'm going to kick it over to you, just kind of talk a little bit about what In Search of Darkness is, and of course, give a plug to In Search of Tomorrow.
Sure. Well, these are long-form documentaries about genre film. And so In Search of Darkness, which came out in 2019, right? I had to think about that. We started in 2018. It came out in 2019, and it's all about 80s horror. And so it's a journey year by year through 80s horror filmmaking, 1980 to 1989, where each year we go through a number of films that came out during that decade, and then we also have interstitial chapters in between, which is larger context stuff. And what happened was In Search of Darkness Part 1 was really the heavy hitters, the Halloweens, the Friday the 13th, a lot of eclectic fare, but really sort of dialing in on the practical effects of and the heroes and the villains and the creatures and the music, the stuff that we really love. And why do we love this stuff? And then all these movies have upwards of 50 or more talking heads from the era. So legends and icons who were in front of the camera or behind the camera talking about these films. Everyone from John Carpenter to Heather Langenkamp and Robert Englund and Barbara Crampton, Stuart Gordon, just talking about how not only their own films, but the films that they love from the era as well. And In Search of Darkness 2, we got into deeper, darker territory, more eclectic fare, and a lot of more international titles and Italian horror and so on and so forth. And now we are up to In Search of Darkness Part 3. And so we could talk about what that means and what we're getting in. But in between that, between Part 2 and Part 3, I did In Search of Tomorrow. And that's all about 80s sci-fi movies, following the same structure and format with 70 interviews from people in front and behind the camera. And so it's been quite the odyssey, because all of these movies are In Search of Darkness Part 1 and 2 were about 4.5 hours each. In Search of Tomorrow was a 5-hour film. And now In Search of Darkness 3 is the longest film we've done for that series. And that's at 5 hours and change. And this is all based on backer and horror community demand, saying, we love this format. We could watch these movies all day. We want more and more and more. And most importantly, what we wanted to do for the third and final installment of this 80s trilogy, we want to move into other decades after this, is we wanted to survey and involve everybody to decide what movies were going to be covered in this film. I look back at the first film and the second film, and people would say, this is great. I love it. Too bad you didn't do X, Y, or Z. Why didn't you do that? What a crime, or wouldn't it be nice if you did this next? And I tried to get them in Part 2, but the thing is, there are hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of films that came out in that era, many thanks to the video boom and this explosion of independent filmmakers and titles. So this time around, it was actually kind of easy for me, because with write-in surveys and polls based on what people wanted, there are plenty of surprises. But I now have 79 films that we cover in Part 3, not to mention all the chapters in between. And a lot of the films that people have said ever since the beginning, where they're like, why didn't you do this? Why didn't you do Extra? I tried to do an Extra Part 2, but unfortunately we just couldn't do it. But then now in Part 3, we are doing Extra, and I was able to get the director to sit down and talk with us. So all good things come to those who wait.
So a couple things. I would just like to, for the record, point out that I am so proud that the title of this show, The Dana Buckler Show, is in the credits for In Search of Tomorrow. I remember, well, I mean, I've seen it multiple times, but just going through the credits and there it just says The Dana Buckler Show. So I want everybody listening to know that it's a pretty awesome feeling when you watch an incredible film, incredible documentary, and then all of a sudden your name pops up in the credits. So I'm just saying.
Well, what that means for people who don't know is that the way we do these films is they're all crowdfunded, and then by the time we come back to the final, where the final film was completed, but before we release it, what we do is we do a final push where everyone who purchases the film, we haven't done the credits yet. And we put everybody in the credits. And so if you started the crowdfunding or if you're finalizing the push over the line, everyone gets to be in the credits. And you can put your name, you can put your podcast, you can put your loved one, you can put your favorite pet. And then what happens is, we put it in the end credits, and then everyone gets a digital copy, and then they get their physical copy with all the cool stuff. And you go to 80shorrordoc.com for all the details. We could talk about that more in depth later. I do want to say one cool thing this time around. I really wanted to give back to the horror community, and I really wanted to give back to our incredibly loyal and enthusiastic backers. This time around, because these end credits can be so long, what I want to do is I want to capture the heart and soul of everyone who loves this stuff. So I'm asking and inviting you, Dana, and everyone who's listening to record a video testimonial, short and sweet, about why you love 80s horror, or why you love an 80s film or filmmaker, or even why the In Search of Darkness franchise has meant something to you in one way or another. And I can't promise every single one, but I'm going to do every one I can, as many as possible, lining those end credits with the entire community talking about why this is so important to all of us. And who knows, maybe there won't be a dry eye in the house when it's all done. You never know. But anyone who wants to do that, all you have to do is go to our socials. 80s Horror Doc on Instagram, Facebook, Twitter. There's a Linktree link. You click on that Linktree link, and then you'll see, how the thing to click to tell you exactly how you would go about submitting your video and what the rules are and so on and so forth. And I just think that will be the ultimate gift back to everyone who has allowed us to do part 2 and especially part 3, because we wouldn't be making part 3 if we didn't get such amazing fan response and appreciation and encouragement.
I have to say, and this is not something that you and I discussed before we started this episode, but that's incredible. I did not realize that was an option. And believe me when I tell you, speaking for myself, and I'm sure a lot of the listeners, you can count on me recording a video. I've got lots to say. The part that made me go, oh, is when you said short and sweet. I'm like, but I've got so much to say.
I know, right? But then if everyone's going, a minute, 2 minutes, 3 minutes, which I know everybody can, then that means less videos.
Absolutely.
So there's a mathematical logic to keeping it short and sweet.
I completely understand. Now, David, I'm going to ask a question that I believe I asked the first time I had you on the show, but I just want to kind of refresh for people who might be new to the In Search of Darkness series. Why the 1980s? Why? You said you want to look at other decades beyond the 1980s, but when it comes down to it, with the first In Search of Darkness and the subsequent follow-up films, why the decision to start in the 1980s? What is it about 1980s horror movies that sort of set the standard?
Well, fundamentally, it starts with Robin Bloch, the CEO of Creator VC. We're a small company. We make these films ourselves, again, crowdfunded by fans for fans. He's the guy who came up with the brilliant idea that how cool would it be if we went through the 1980s and go through movie by movie and really get a bunch of people who were there and discuss it and celebrate it. And I always thought that was a great idea. I'm on board. Where do I begin? That being said, there's a reason that this decade is so important. Because so many, I'm a huge fan of all the decades leading up to the 80s for all different reasons. Because we stand on the very broad shoulders as a foundation of these films that came before the 80s, which is why the 80s were so great. But there's a convergence of the technology of the practical effects and the technology of the VHS boom, where it must be stated, and it's very obvious, but I think when you point it out, it makes sense. People could not have instant gratification when they wanted to watch entertainment. In terms of choosing the title themselves. Sure, they could turn on the television. If they caught one of their favorite horror movies, they were in luck. Or they could even plan it in advance using the TV guide, by a week in advance going through the TV guide and marking all the things that you want to see. But you couldn't record them and watch them when you wanted. It was appointment television. You had to be there. You know, if you saw a movie playing in the theater and it wasn't in a theater near you, remember, it was always playing at a theater near you. They didn't have to say near you, but they want to make sure that that you don't have to go that far to seek out the film that they want you to see. These are important little details in the selling and the marketing of films, right? So all of a sudden, there's a technology where all you need to get is a box and put it next to your television and a tape and pop it in, and you can watch it whenever you want. And on top of this, you have cable television, where all of a sudden there's all these movies, but it's not like a one and done. They're constantly on rotation. So if you missed the Phantasm the first time around, they're going to play Phantasm 50 times that month, and you'll be able to catch it. So there was something about the 80s where the filmmaking was spectacular. There was some resonance because people could see more films more often on repetition. Oh, I loved Evil Dead. I'm going to see that again and again and again. I'm going to wear out the tape, or I'm going to rent it again next week to show my friends. There's a whole dynamic there where you could share movies with the people that you love. And you didn't have that in the same way before. And there was an explosion of films by indie filmmakers because the studios, as gatekeepers, still didn't do a lot of that stuff. And so producers like Roger Corman, Charlie Band, Lloyd Kaufman would step into this vacuum and say, well, I'm going to make super low budget, fun, ridiculous exploitation films and get them to mom and pop video stores so everyone could watch and make a mint overnight, which they did. So it's kind of a complicated answer because there's lots of working parts. But I think when people look back at this is a very different decade than there ever was before when it came to consumption of entertainment. And I would argue that although horror has always been kind of in B-movie status, there was something happening where you got more B movies, which is something we're really capitalizing on in Search of Darkness Part 3. But at the same time, you have filmmakers like Stanley Kubrick, saying, I'm going to take a Stephen King novel and I'm going to do what I do. And I'm going to use the word that people hate, and I hate it too, but I'm going to elevate this genre. And why that's important is that you're elevating it for a whole other faction of moviegoers who normally would steer clear of horror. But they're like, well, I want to see this haunted house movie starring Jack Nicholson because he's great. The next thing you know, you have John Landis who made a mint on Animal House, making a different kind of animal, and he's doing American Werewolf. So what producers are looking at, and I'm talking now more about the business side of all this stuff, is producers are seeing dollar signs when a movie like Halloween 1978 for a very low budget makes millions. Then Friday the 13th says, well, we'll do the same thing. We'll call it a holiday thing, and we'll just have a killer kill random kids at a summer camp. That makes millions of dollars on a really low budget. Now, all of a sudden, everyone is standing at attention saying there's something here and it's money and I can capitalize on that. And I see the formula that works, while at the same time, Hollywood is starting to pay more attention because they're seeing that this is a genre that's really taking off. And how can we be part of the game?
That's incredible. Now, and you're right. You're right. That whole thing, the way you explain that is so spot on. And it's something that's still done to this day. I mean, when you look at something like Blumhouse, their model, I mean, it's an interesting world we live in.
The franchises, the reboots, getting new Halloweens, getting 70 Annabelle films. There's a reason for all this stuff. And it's a sure bet. Yeah. Because you could still make these films. You can make them slicker now, but you could still make them for a much lower budget. Where the star is a doll versus an actual star, so you can keep your budget low. It costs a lot. It costs more to market these films than it does to make them these days. So studios, which are a business, that have obligations to their stockholders, and their board of directors, they need to be able to guarantee return on their investment and massive profits, so everyone is happy. So horror is really selling really well to this day. I mean, everyone's talking about this year as a horror renaissance, whether they were on streaming channels or in the theater. And they're right. And so we're always going to get the reboots, the requels, the reimaginings, the sequels. I think it's great that we get for every Hellraiser, you also get a Prey, and you get some creative ideas to reinvigorate a franchise that you either love or hate, but either way, it does very well, and it keeps things alive. And you can merch this thing to no end. And what this ultimately does is it creates space for brand new ideas, and a movie like Smile or a movie like Barbarian, which I haven't seen, so don't spoil it. But these movies now have a place because, X, Pearl, they have a place now because people are paying and lining up first weekend, especially to see these movies. And we're getting plenty of brand new ideas. They might be derivative to a certain extent, but isn't every story? There's only 7 stories that have to be repurposed.
And you're absolutely right, because for anyone that's listened to this show for any length of time, that the hill I choose to die on is always give me something original, even if it's in a sequel. Take it give me something original. Give me an original idea. And you're right. If you look at theatrically released movies right now, there's really no middle ground. Really, there's the big tent poles, and then there's the modestly to low budget horror films that are coming out, and those and those are the movies that, I mean, listen, I went and saw Halloween. I've seen Barbarian. I'm going to see Smile tomorrow. I mean, I'm excited about this. Here's the thing. Go ahead.
Can I interrupt real quick?
Yes.
Just interject real quick, and I apologize, but I'm on the caffeine is now doing the talking. But, with Halloween Ends, we don't even have to dive into it, but it's very polarized. There's lots of people who are just saying, like Halloween Kills, I don't like this movie because it's not what I expected. But I believe whether it succeeds or fails on whatever your personal barometer is, it has absolute merits for making an effort to do something different with the franchise. And I applaud that. And I think even within the confines of a franchise and sequels, that needs to be applauded and recognized as original ideas. Whether or not you think that they succeed or not, at least they swung for the fences on this one.
And let's see, if you're listening to this episode the day it comes out, I believe you're going to be listening to the Halloween one a few hours later. So my review of Halloween Ends will be out the same day as this. And I agree with you. And not to spoil my review of Halloween Ends, but the fact of the matter is I agree that they should be applauded for trying something different. And that's all I'm going to say right now. They tried something different. David, this is what I've come to learn over 9 years of podcasting. And frankly, even before that, is that the horror community, as a whole, seems to be I look at horror. I look at movie fandoms. Okay. I look at the fans of Star Wars, the fans of Star Trek, the Harry Potter fans. The Lord of the Ring fans. The horror community seems to be kind of upper echelon as far as the amount of people that are in that community. And I can speak to here where I live. They have a new convention center that opened up, and we had our first annual HorrorCon here this year. And the heavy hitters were there. I randomly, for those who don't know, my day job is I help to manage a restaurant during the day, and we were closed. It was a Friday night. We've been closed for an hour. One of my employees comes out and says, there's a guy up front. He wants to know if you'll open the kitchen back up. Him and a couple friends. I walk out, and it's Dave Sheridan, Felissa Rose, and Thom Matthews just standing at the door. And the irony of that is,
gift at your doorstep.
Yes. And I just walked up, and I was just like, well, holy shit. Hey guys, how are you? And I immediately knew who they were right away. And I point out that Felissa Rose was just the nicest person. I had never met them. And Thom is surprisingly taller than me, a lot taller than me. So I was able to take care of them. But it was the first convention this town had, and it was packed with people of all ages.
That speaks volumes, right?
So I asked this question, and there's probably no way to truly define this answer. What is it about horror movies that draws so many people? What is it about horror? I mean, In Search of Darkness, 1, 2, and 3, they're all about 80s horror, but what is it about horror movies themselves? Is it the fear? What is it that drives people, and what makes the community so strong?
Horror is full of subgenres. Horror is not a very simple thing. It's not just slasher. It's not just torture porn. It's not just Transylvania 65000, comedy, Beetlejuice and Addams Family and Hocus Pocus. But they all have a foot firmly in the genre. And so it's a genre that has a very wide appeal because there's all different facets that you can appreciate about this genre. I also have come to really believe that you have to just be pre-wired to appreciate horror. There's the people who just do not understand it because they see the blood and the violence and the gore. And then there are the people who either appreciate or tolerate the blood and violence and gore because of the story that it's telling. There's a lot of creativity in this genre. Some people love to be scared. Some people love to just escape in it. Some people love to dissect the film for the work that went into creating and crafting a good scare and a good monster. There's all sorts of ways to look at it. And I think it's got the coolest merch. Everyone gets to wear black. I went to Monsterpalooza this past weekend, and I went with my son, who's young, and he's really getting into it now. And I made a joke as we were walking, because we parked very far away because it's very popular, so it's hard to get parking. And I saw all these couples either in costume or individuals wearing black. And I said, see, if you don't even know how to get to the convention center, follow the person wearing black, because that's the uniform. That's really my answer, essentially, is I think it's a very popular thing. You don't see romantic comedy conventions. You don't even see comedy conventions. No. People go see comedy all the time in comedy clubs. I mean, it's an industry, don't get me wrong. But there's something about a convention where it's a different dynamic. And people love to commiserate with like-minded people who appreciate the same thing. And you can celebrate that kind of stuff without ridicule. You could wear your horror shirt of someone being eviscerated and people will say cool shirt rather than flee in terror.
Yeah, absolutely. So circling back to In Search of Darkness Part 3.
And by the way, Felissa Rose is in Search of Darkness Part 3. We finally have her sitting down with us.
Outstanding.
It's super fun.
Oh, I can say this is somebody that I had got an opportunity to spend about an hour with, and
Sleepaway Camp and all the other fun stuff she's done. Victor Crowley, yeah,
absolutely. And I'll tell you, when I saw her, I said, "You're Felissa Rose," and she's like, "You know who I am?" I said, "Absolutely." And we're not at a horror convention, all right? We're at a restaurant, so it's got to feel good to her to just know that people, wherever she goes, people are going to recognize her.
You guys are everywhere. It's the horror underground.
Yeah.
Because that's the thing is, I'm sure she walked in the restaurant saying, no one's going to know who I am. They probably won't open up the kitchen for us because they won't know or care who we are. And you're like, Sleepaway Camp.
Sleepaway Camp, absolutely. And with Thom, it was like Tommy Jarvis. I mean,
exactly.
I know. And of course,
Thom Mathews in Search of Darkness Part 3.
Oh, you see, this is so exciting. Now, so let's talk about.
Who was the third one that you said?
So he was Dave Sheridan, and he's been in a couple of Rob Zombie films, but he's probably most well known for playing Officer Doofy in the Wayans Brothers Scary Movie. Which, by the way, I knew who he was.
I forgot it was Doofy and not Dewey.
That's funny. So, and I won't spoil the end of Scary Movie for those who haven't seen it. This came out 22 years ago, but he is involved in sort of a twist ending of that, if you'll say, sort of a Usual Suspects twist ending. So, okay, so I've got a few questions I want to ask about In Search of Darkness Part 3. Sure. I guess since you've already mentioned a couple names, I'll start with, are there some new faces that we can expect to see in Part 3 that have not been in the first two films?
In Search of Darkness Part 3 has 70 interviews. And out of the 70 interviews, there are 39 new faces, 50 new interviews total,
Wow.
brand new. And 20 interviews are, as those who know and have heard me talk about this, every time we sit and talk to our talent, we talk to them for anywhere between 1 hour to 2 hours, sometimes 3 hours. And so there's a wealth of material that doesn't make it to the final cut, where there's plenty of anecdotes and stories and conversations and opinions that are perfectly applied to part 3 now that we're talking about a bunch of new topics and even a bunch of films that we haven't been able to get to yet. So yeah, 39 brand new faces to this to the series. So there's lots of fresh faces and discussion. And it was very important to do that because since we're really going to a lot of the shot on video, straight to video titles, still lots of theatrical titles that we just haven't covered yet. You'd be surprised, but we still haven't done Serpent and the Rainbow. We still haven't done Prom Night. We still haven't done Jaws 4, The Revenge, Jaws the Revenge.
Which I'm an expert on. Trust me. I know that movie better than anyone.
Still hadn't done Monkey Shines. There are just so many movies. And so it was important for me to get a nice cross section of, again, talent from in front of the camera or behind the camera, a bunch of new experts who have great thoughts and insights and opinions and context for all of this kind of stuff. And a lot of your favorites are back. Everyone from John Carpenter to Joe Dante to Barbara Crampton to Heather Langenkamp to Robert Englund to Doug Bradley. I mean, it's not a In Search of Darkness movie without the heavy hitters of horror, so bringing them all back.
One of the things that I really love about both of the first two In Search of Darkness films and In Search of Tomorrow is, the way you have the movie sort of choreographed is you go year by year, but in between each year, there's kind of a mini featurette that sort of talks about a specific subject. Now, I will keep this 100% spoiler free. Am I allowed to mention that you sent me a little sample to?
Yeah, you can talk all about that.
Okay, so
the stuff I sent you, for those not in the know, I sent Dana a 24-minute sampler. I just thought a 5-hour movie might be a little bit much. Yeah. So I gave him a 24-minute sampler plate. So he gets to go to the, the buffet and choose 4 films. He didn't choose. I chose them for him.
Yeah.
I went to the buffet, chose 4 films and a particular chapter that I thought demonstrate a good cross-section of what we're going for. So feel free to talk about it.
Well, so that was the thing I wanted to, and thank you. I was, as soon as you sent it, I immediately watched it. I said, this is fantastic. The chapters in between the movies. Maybe you can talk about them, maybe you can't, but what are some of the discussions that we can look forward to seeing along with the movies that are covered and the interviews? I'm really a big fan of those in-between chapters, of those chapters in between the years. So what can we expect?
They are incredibly important to me because I think otherwise it just becomes a big, long list of movies. Now, that's fun and cool, especially the more movies, the better. And I really did my best. I think we cover the most movies than ever before in previous In Search of Darknesses. But these chapters really tie all the effort and content into the context of the decade, how they were influenced by what was going on in the pop culture and politics and the socio-political atmosphere. The culture really influences the types of movies that are made. And conversely, the movies that are made really get into the zeitgeist and then inform the culture as well as other films. And so it's almost like a snake eating its tail by the midway through the decade. What's very cool about this is we talk about the satanic panic and heavy metal horror and what goes on there. We talk about we do focus in on this whole VHS boom and how it was important and why it really created so many independent filmmakers making films and why. I sort of gave you the sort of Reader's Digest version earlier in it, but that's really what we sort of dive into in this film as well. And I'll say also that we talk about a very popular thing that we did in part 2 that we continue in part 3 is having spotlights on individual creative folks talking about themselves and their careers. So last time around, we did like Tom Savini on Tom Savini, Linnea Quigley on Linnea Quigley, talking about themselves, Robert Englund on Robert Englund. Well, this time around, we're doing the same. And, Dee Wallace talking about her career, Adrienne Barbeau talking about her career.
Yeah.
We even have Screaming Mad George, an amazing effects artist. We went to Japan to track him down, and he was happy to talk to us. And he has an infectious laugh and was so happy to talk about working on films like, changing a girl into a cockroach in Nightmare on Elm Street 4, or the shunting in society, which we cover in part 1. It's very cool. It's a lot of stuff that we talk about. We hit on a lot of topics as well.
So, I mean, it goes without saying, I'm going to become a backer of In Search of Darkness 3. Like that's a no brainer. You before we even talked, I knew I was doing this because I have to, I have to, but I need.
Thank you.
Yeah, of course. I mean, it's been, I feel like I've been along for this ride since the first film came out. And I remember talking to you about the first In Search of Darkness. And do you think you'll do a part 2? And there was like, yeah, I think we're going to do it too. And now that when we're talking about this, are you going to do a third? I think there's enough for a third, like this is, I feel like since 2019, I've just been part of this journey now, and I'm so excited to continue on this journey. But for those listening who want to get involved, who want to be a part of this, who want to get a copy of the movie, they want to do there's going to be links in this episode show notes, but throughout the month of October, talk about what's going on.
Yeah, go to 80shorrordoc.com. That's where you can get it. The deadline is Halloween. After that, we're not going to be selling it. This is the only way you can get your name in the credits. And if you shoot a video testimonial, you'll get it in as well. So this is the only time that it's just a limited time run. But what's cool about putting your name in the credits and or getting your video in the credits as well, if that's something that you're interested in, is this becomes a keepsake. This is something that is more than just a movie that you paid for. First of all, it's more than a movie because it's 5 hours of film. Also, if you've missed part 1 or part 2, either seeing it or getting a physical copy, we're selling the trilogy. So you can get pieces or the whole trilogy. So you could instead of just only part 3, you just buy the trilogy box set with a slipcover, all the cool stuff. We have swag, everything from a trio of awesome posters, digital download of the movie and the soundtrack. We even have a cool membership card that we do that looks like a video membership card, which has a bunch of merch deals with horror merchants, that are super cool. We just wanted to do as much fun stuff as possible and go out with a bang. But I think it's very important for those who are brand new to this saying, oh, what the heck is this? You got to know that this is about getting it in your hands and getting a physical copy. Streaming comes and goes. There's no guarantee that this will be on streaming, but it will always be guaranteed to be on your shelf if you get a copy of it. But it's a limited time because we're a small company. And we make and manufacture and distribute this stuff entirely ourselves. So we don't have this massive storeroom or just make it on demand. That costs lots of money. And people also don't understand that if you have a small batch where you say, I just want to get 100 here or 100 there, it costs tremendously. It's much, much higher than if you do a larger, like a big campaign for Halloween month. Then it brings the cost down from the manufacturer and it makes it something that we can pass along to you.
Yeah.
So there's methods to our madness. There's a reason why we do things the way we do. But I think most importantly, maybe coming away from what I'm saying now is other than go to 80shorrordoc.com before Halloween at the stroke of midnight. It's almost time, kids. The clock is ticking. I think it's cool that you can get, because we don't always do this, you can get the entire trilogy. So if you have part 1 or you only have part 2, you can get either or both or buy all 3. And I think that's pretty cool.
That's awesome. I'm so excited for this. So I have to, I know there's no timetables on these things, these projects that they take some time to put together, but are you planning a premiere anytime, first of the year or anything like that?
We're not. This is our big hurrah. the film, the thing is, we like to show it in October when it's ready, but the way we're doing it is it won't be ready because the end credits aren't going to be made until our campaign is over after Halloween. So yeah, this is sort of the big way to get it is now. And if you go to all of our socials, there's plenty of stuff. We do daily clips from the film. Not direct clips, they're a little more promotional. We call them daily drops. But you get an idea of who's in it and what they're talking about and what the big celebration is all about. And plenty of trivia and interactivity to abounds when we're doing a campaign like this at 80s Horror Doc.
That's terrific. And I just want to let the listeners know that as you're hearing David and I's voice right now, you can open up whatever device you're using to listen to this podcast, and every one of the links that he just mentioned are one touch away. All the links are in this episode's show notes. So, David, anything else we want to cover before we wrap this up?
Well, what are you watching for spooky season?
Well, like we talked about, I did see Halloween Ends, and I am, you know what? This month is going to be I've been going back over the Friday the 13th movies.
Oh, really?
Every October I try to pick a franchise. One would think Halloween since the new one came out, but I'm so sort of up to date on those films because
well, you were hanging out with Tommy Jarvis. It only makes sense.
It does. Right? And here's the thing. I mentioned this on a previous podcast. If you run into him at a local watering hole and you want to buy him a drink, all right? A dirty Belvedere martini with blue cheese olives. Don't even ask him. Just bring it to him.
That's very specific.
Just bring it to him. And Felissa, bring her a glass of Pinot Grigio. All right.
So she seems like a wine type.
So just that's my tip. So I know they're on the convention circuit. So you're gonna run into them. If you want to buy them a drink, just bring it right to them. They'll be delighted, I'm sure.
And Tom Matthews also. I think I will spoil or single out with Tom Matthews. He's in Return of the Living Dead and Return of the Living Dead Part 2. And anyone who has watched, if not appreciated, Return of the Living Dead Part 2, which is very different yet very much the same as Part 1, he goes into some of the reasons why there's some repetition in Part 2 between, his character and the first film. And it's kind of an interesting tale.
That I'm excited to see. I'm excited to see this. So, David, people want to follow, you went over the socials for In Search of Darkness, but people want to keep up with the other work that you do, and how can they follow you on social media?
I am very active on Twitter. So you go to Tiki Ambassador is my handle. And I also have a site called itcamefromblog.com. And so my other socials are on Twitter and Instagram and Facebook at itcamefromblog. And that's, It Came From Blog is kind of like my pop culture musings, everything from movie reviews, which I need to update, but lots of articles and interviews that I've done from my time, everything from The Hollywood Reporter to LA Weekly and Entertainment Tonight, and just for the site itself. Lots and lots of interviews with celebrities and filmmakers and important folks, and just my thoughts on pop culture. What I love to do, especially on Twitter, that's probably where I'm most responsive, is it's sort of a steady stream of the pop culture randomness that pops in my brain. I love thinking about something, finding it on an image or a commercial or something on the internets, and then posting it on there. And then I just get tremendous energy from people saying, "Oh my God, I have not thought of that for years, or since I was a kid." Or I had that toy or that collectible, or, "Oh my God, I remember that commercial," blah, blah, blah. I've been searching for that forever. That's the kind of stuff that I thrive on. No one gets paid for that, but I think if you could just go to the internet, go to social media and find some positivity and just nostalgia and curate some goodness, and dodge the slings and arrows of the other stuff that we all know and either like to engage in but get really muddy in the process, or hate. you can cultivate a really warm and great and supportive and fun community just reminiscing about fun stuff from our youth and even present day without being snarky about it. And that's the stuff that I really love and love to be part of.
Absolutely. I love it. And of course, David, can we real quickly, before I let you go, there's a project that you are executive producer on, and it's one that I'm also very, very excited about. Can we talk just a little bit about that, and just if there's still an opportunity for people to get involved with that project?
Yeah, absolutely. Aliens Expanded. We are doing Creator VC is going beyond the In Search of Darkness movies. And we've been doing a variety of other projects. If you go to creatorvc.com, you can see all the sorts of things we're doing. And one of them is Aliens Expanded, which is a deep dive on James Cameron's Aliens. This is being directed by Ian Nathan, an amazing guy. A Brit who is an author who is the editor-in-chief of Empire magazine, and he's written a variety of things. If you have Alien Vault or Terminator Vault on your shelf, he's done biographies on James Cameron, Ridley Scott, Peter Jackson, and so on. This guy knows his stuff, loves his film through and through, and we could not be happier to have him on board. Piloting the ship for Aliens Expanded. No better person than him to really do a deep dive on aliens. And what's cool about it also is that we're bringing in the aliens community to be part of this. So a lot of if you're really into aliens, you probably know that there's lots of alien communities on all sorts of media platforms, just loving talking about and celebrating aliens. And we have incorporated as many of those folks as we can to help advise us and work with us to make this the best movie for fans by fans. And so we just had our first crowdfunding, very successful crowdfunding in September up to the October 1st. And now we're in pre-production and starting to work on the movie. And the movie itself has a bunch of people who are, on camera or behind the scenes, Carrie Henn, Newt, and, you just got to, if you go to aliensexpanded.com, you'll see everybody who's on it. I don't want to get into a laundry list of names. But I think most importantly, like all the projects that we do at Creator VC, this is not you back it and then you wait a year or later or never to get the project. We're doing a year-long number of activities, seminars, Q&As, interactions with talent, and discussions and backer events that all just keep everyone engaged and helping steer the trajectory of the film and just be part of this. And you get a lot of cool swag as well. But that's all stuff that you can't get until the end now when we sell it with our final sale. But you can go to Aliens Expanded now and sign up and get emails. And every time we have something going on, an event that you could be part of and engage with talent and so on and so forth, that's, Ian's going to be giving individual seminars, all about various aspects of the alien world and aliens itself. It's very, very cool. And it's very unique and fun. And we'd like to be transparent. We'd like to sit down and talk with everybody and talk about what we're up to, what our process is, what we think you would want. Are we right? Are we in the wrong place? So yeah, people can be involved for the next year if they get involved now. All they have to do is sign up.
Oh, I'm excited. I'm also excited. Not only is Aliens one of my top 10 films of all time, it is one of the quintessential films, in my opinion, ever made. But that movie in particular is responsible, and I've never really talked about this on the show before, is responsible for a significant rise in listenership for this podcast. In 2016, I was doing a series on the history of the Alien franchise, and I did an episode on Aliens, about 45 minutes long, where, just kind of going over a brief history of how the film got made and put the episode and didn't think anything of it. And then a month later, it got featured on GamesRadar.com. A writer found the show, listened to the episode and said, you've got to listen to this. And one day I woke up and my listener download numbers had gone 10x overnight. I'm like, what the hell is going on? And then the writer didn't even tell me that he was featuring the podcast in the show. I actually Googled, my show. I'm like, what is going on? And he was like, you've got to listen to this episode of this Dana Buckler's podcast about aliens. It's terrific, blah, blah, blah. So that movie is near and dear to my heart for a multitude of reasons.
It's a ravenous fan base that loves to absorb everything that they can. It's really it's an intelligent audience that really just likes to soak up every additional nugget and theorize about all sorts of things, canon or non-canon, what ifs, just the hardware, the creatures, the world, the universe. There's just so much. It's incredibly rich. And that's why we chose this as our first expanded film. That's a one-off on one particular film. Robin Block said this is the one because it covers so many bases. It's action, it's sci-fi, it's horror, and it's aliens, and it's James Cameron. And it's just, that's almost self-explanatory to anybody listening.
That's terrific.
Have no reason. Like, why aliens? It's aliens.
No one's gonna. No. I can't imagine anyone even ever asked that question. Why aliens? I guess one more quick question.
Why Alien versus Predator Requiem? Okay, now I need to explain.
Yes. I know you've got a heart out in just a moment here, so I just want to ask one more quick question.
Sure.
The In Search of Darkness trilogy. That is the you've mentioned and sort of teased the idea that you will explore other decades, which I think is fantastic. Last time I had you on the show, it was In Search of Tomorrow, and I'm just going to ask real quick if I can get an exclusive, if the gears have started turning on In Search of Tomorrow too.
I'll tell you tomorrow.
Perfect.
No, the gears are turning very slowly because we're so actively in our campaign, but we are very, very keen to do In Search of Tomorrow too. That is very much on the table and is something that we really want to do. What we really are focusing on next is In Search of Tomorrow 2 and In Search of Darkness 90s. That's really what's sort of on the plate next, in addition to obviously making Aliens Expanded.
Yes, exciting.
But yeah, right now, because we're just so actively promoting In Search of Darkness 3, this is the fourth film of long-form documentaries. I mean, see, we were talking about aliens, so now that's on my brain. In Search of Darkness Part 3, you put all three In Search of Darknesses together, the trilogy, it's 14-plus hour exploration into 80s horror. That's pretty substantial. And what surprises me, having done this, is how much more we haven't even touched, just because there's so much that goes on in this decade, and there's so much material. And there still will be movies where you're like, what a crime. They didn't do X or Y or Z. After 14 hours, they couldn't find the time to put this movie that I want. And you're right. We couldn't find the time, because if that went in, another one that someone wished was in there doesn't get to go in. And there's no way to physically do it unless we keep on doing more. And who knows, maybe that's on the table down the road ways,
sure.
But right now I think a trilogy is the best way to cap it all. And, all these things that I'm looking forward to doing next are things I'm excited to be having the opportunity to do, and I get the opportunity to do all this stuff if you guys out there listening are appreciating what we're doing and supporting us and voting with your dollars. Because when you vote with your dollar for indie filmmaking, that is helping to ensure future filmmaking from the group that's making it, whatever it may be. And that's really the practical way of doing it. And, listen, it's not something that anyone is required to do. And there's no pressure on it whatsoever. But that's how I think about all this stuff. I want to vote with my dollar. I want to go see the new Halloween Ends in the theater. Because even though it's the third in a trilogy in a franchise that's been going on forever, to me, that's telling Universal and Blumhouse to make more horror movies. To me, that's telling them that Blumhouse should be more courageous by making more brand new ideas into films. And for every Halloween Ends or Purge movie or whatever, Paranormal Activity, when they dip into the franchise yet again, that allows their coffers to be big enough to take swings on what was Freaked Freaks. What's the one with the body switch? The body switch movie with
I know which one you're talking about.
That one, like really fun, ridiculous movies where it's an original idea. I know. Now we got to look it up. Right?
No, but it's fine.
And apologies to the filmmakers, but it just popped in my head.
If they take those chances, you get a movie like Get Out in 2017. Mm-hmm. I mean, so I'm right there with you. I'm absolutely right there with you.
I'm going to look it up real quick.
Yep, absolutely.
Give me 2 seconds. Vince Vaughn, Freaky.
Yes. Okay.
And so, I mean, these you got to, in your own way, spend the money that you want to spend the way you want to spend it. But if you want to see more of a certain type of thing, you really have to vote with your dollar. And that's how it gets made, whether it's a big company or a small company. I always like to support the underdogs. And ironically, sometimes the underdogs are bigger companies when they want to do original product. Because in this day and age, studios, all they want to do is make safe bets through and through. So if a studio or a filmmaker or a producer wants to gamble on something that's new or innovative, or at least just different from what's out there, you got to enable them to do it. And if you want to see it, if you sit and complain that there's none and you're not doing what you can, even if you're not spending money on it, you're a proponent of it, I mean, all this stuff helps. Spreading the good word about this kind of stuff is equally important.
Yeah, well said. And you know what? I got to take a page out of your book sometime, because I am one of those guys that complains about, it always being the same stuff. But you're right. I need to vote with I need to go to the movies more often. You're right. I listen. Yeah. I gave Universal my money this weekend for Halloween,
and we're right. Listen, complaints are valid.
Yeah.
If you're tired of sequels and you don't want to see sequels and you want to see something new, you're allowed to complain, oh my God, it's one more of blank, franchise, enough already. But on the flip side, rather than wasting your words, on in the world on that kind of stuff, you could say, well, this is not my cup of tea. I've seen enough of this. But here's a list of things that I can't wait to see that I hope are good, that I applaud whoever decided to produce this. Let's go support this and give it a try,
Absolutely. I agree. So, David, I just want to say thank you for all that you've done. Big thanks to Creator VC, to Robin Block, to everyone for what you've done, for the journey you continue to take us on. And I am excited for what's coming out soon. I'm excited for what's coming out down the road. And just, it's always a pleasure to talk to you. And I'm looking forward to when you have a little time, when you're not in the middle of,
I just need a good night's sleep, and then I'd love to come on with nothing to plug, just to shoot the shit.
Yeah, I look forward to that. So thank you so much. And I know we're going to keep in touch. And, good luck with the release of In Search of Darkness Part 3. I know I'm excited. I know my listeners are excited. So thank you.
Thank you so much, Dana, and happy spooky season, everybody.
Absolutely. Happy Halloween, everyone. My name is Dana Buckler, and thank you so much for listening.